Hey, welcome back to The Long Game. We are on a mission to demystify the science that shapes our lives and to unpack how great ideas built here in Scotland become real-world medicines, devices, and new companies at the cutting edge of life sciences. I'm Ross Kagan, Regis Professor of Precision Medicine at University of Glasgow.
And I'm Sandy Weir, Tech Innovation Leader and Strategic Program Manager, joining from Edinburgh.
On The Long Game, we explore the collision of cells, code, and capital in the Scottish life sciences sector. As always, lovely to see you today, Sandy. How you doing?
Yeah, it's lovely to see you too, Ross. Delighted to see you again. I've been enjoying this blast of sunshine that we've been experiencing in the last few days. I think I'm actually fully topped up on my vitamin D, which I guess is probably unusual this time of year. And I'm also really excited about our podcast today. But you're gonna tell us more. Yeah, please tell us more.
Yeah, today our guest is someone who has mastered all three of those. We're joined by Dr. Deborah O'Neill. Hey, Deborah, a true titan of the Scottish biotech ecosystem.
Yeah, Deborah's resume, I'm going to embarrass you here, Deborah. Deborah's resume is really impressive. She's an immunologist by training, but in 2004, she took the leap from lab bench to boardroom, founding NovaBiotics. And that's a company that's been created to tackle one of the greatest threats to modern medicine. That's antimicrobial resistance. But she isn't just building her own company. She's actively involved in building an entire city's economic future. And I'm so sorry to lay this on your shoulders, Deborah, as well.
I hadn't realised that, but okay.
But you're also
Deborah.
serving on the chair of the Life Sciences Board for Opportunity Northeast and Bio Aberdeen. And it's an absolute delight to see you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation to both of you. I'm looking forward to a good chat.
Absolutely. Well, you are quite literally helping to transition Aberdeen from the oil capital of Europe into a world-class life sciences cluster. No pressure. Deborah, it is an absolute privilege to have you on the podcast. Again, welcome to The Long Game.
Yeah, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. It's great that you're here with us today. Please, Deborah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I, as you said, academic by background, love research, love science, love looking at the issues of infection, how the body responds to that, how the body fights that, what happens when it doesn't. So very much as an immunologist, the host pathogen world, but more from the body side. And I guess life morphed into learning about that. How can we develop better therapies? Learning from how the body, when it does fight infection and deal with inflammation successfully, how does it do that? So looking at the immune system as a blueprint for very much needed new classes of, as you say, antimicrobials, but also anti-inflammatory. This is The Long Game podcast. It has been a long game, as you said, 2004 when I made that transition, and the business has transitioned as well. So we now have two divisions. So we still have, NovaBiotics Pharma, very much focused on drug discovery and development, using that innate immune system as the blueprint for the molecules that we're developing and taking all the way through to very late stage, phase 3 clinical trials. And the other side of the business is now NovaBiotics Consumer Health.
Yes.
The bit that actually makes money. So a very different world. We pivoted in 2023, post-COVID for life science. Things have never been tougher. They're hopefully the signs that things are starting to get easier in terms of investment, but the ability to pivot a product and a program that we'd started off as a pharmaceutical in more to the consumer health space, has really opened up lots of opportunities for us. But the pharma side of the business still going well as well. And I guess, the ecosystem here, NovaBiotics began life as a spin out from now the University of Aberdeen's Rowett Research Institute, and we weren't alone. I think here in the Northeast, you have that unique mix of an incredibly entrepreneurial culture. And we can't just thank the energy sector for that. I think if you look at the tea merchants, lots of folks who came before that, the fishing industry, very canny, very entrepreneurial region, has always been. Add to that world-class life science research that I always like to say is a little bit older, because if you go back to when the University of Aberdeen officially started teaching medicine, probably as King's College as was, 1495. So we've kind of been around for a while. So that world-class research, ancient university. We also have Robert Gordon's University. So, also in healthcare, whether it's pharmacy, everything from bioengineering. So we have two great universities now against that entrepreneurial backdrop. But what we weren't seeing was enough of that transition and companies spinning out, no physical infrastructure. And I am putting our money where our mouth is, sitting in BioHub, which was a kind of transformational project that Opportunity Northeast led. And this was a piece that was missing, the infrastructure for spin outs and even growing companies to be able to move into and a physical part of a wider ecosystem that provides training, support, everything that new businesses need. So I wish all this had been here 20 years ago, but it's still, benefiting our businesses and being part of that. So yeah, absolutely. Having lived it, been there, done that, got many of the T-shirts. It's a privilege and really exciting to work with these other amazing companies that are just starting, or bio entrepreneurs who are considering this, discussing their options, what the pathway is, because there's no single one for any individual or any business. And it's thriving now. BioHub, having Opportunity Northeast here as, an organization focused on that local economic diversification is great, and it's kind of bringing life science into the light and providing that support, partnering with the university, the NHS, all the other essential components that are needed. It's great to be part of, and it's making a difference.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great introduction. We're going to dive into a lot of this, aren't we, Ross?
It is. So, no, we're going to get to lots of this. We're going to. We won't have time to do everything, but we have in previous podcasts talked about what we term the valley of death of companies, not so much just the money, but this where you get through that first round of growth and then you hit that second wall. And I think you have described it quite nicely. Also, Sandy and I have been very active, and certainly I've been very active in trying to build similar things here in Glasgow. This is a conversation that we can certainly have. But actually, at least at the beginning, we'll also take a dive into the science as well as the business. But let's talk about you a little bit more, if you don't mind. Because you're trained as an immunologist. Let's see my notes: UCL, UC San Diego, University of Ghent, before arriving in Aberdeen. And as you mentioned, you opened your company NovaBiotics in 2004. I guess my question is, to riff off of some of your points. What made you decide? So 2004 was really just when people were thinking about starting companies, certainly here in Scotland. I've had some experience starting them, and these were early days. So what made you decide to start it, and instead of just staying on the traditional academic track? And while we're at it, what would 2026 Deborah tell 2004 Deborah?
Ooh, okay. So going back many, many, many years, 2004, that's a great question, because at the Rowett Research Institute, I had a tenured post. It wasn't the University of Aberdeen. I just landed their first ever BPSRC grant in collaboration with the Morden and University of Edinburgh. The Scottish government had changed policy, and it wasn't really classed as double dipping if government funded research was applying for research council grants, as long as it was in collaboration, and Edinburgh was one of those collaborators. So got that grant, which was incredible, but still decided to spin the business out with all the uncertainty that came of that, really because I knew what eventually ended up as being NovaBiotics could never be just a side project. And I obviously had commitments to my academic research and, the research at the Rowett. And it was where that focus, was going to end up. And to me, it was more of a step than a jump. I guess personally, my background is from a very entrepreneurial family who've had their own business. So I've kind of lived that to some degree, even though I went through the academic track. And back then, things were different in academia as well. So I honestly thought, it's now or never. You have to do it. I'm going to learn things, even if it doesn't work. But also you can always go back. It's not a one-way street. This may not work out, but I may want to do that later on. Delighted to say it did work out. But yeah, it was very much to do this properly. This is the only way to do it. NovaBiotics and the potential therapies I'm really want to get going and develop may never properly see the light of day if this is just a side project that's funded by grants, etc. And I guess I was keen on leading that and not necessarily just developing IP to out-license.
Yeah, I mean, a key point, I just want to underline a point that you made, which is, and I think it's not such an exotic point now, but 20 years ago it was more so, which is we're not doing this just to entertain ourselves, and we're not actually just doing this to get grants. We're actually doing this to help people.
Yeah.
And we are paid to be problem solvers, and solving that problem means getting it all the way to the patient. And getting it all the way to the patient means at some point it has to go private. There's
Definitely.
really no other path forward on that. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I love that thing of, we're paid to be problem solvers. I think as scientists, we're entrepreneurial, full stop. You go where others fear to tread, else you wouldn't succeed. Your research is new. You're always kind of pushing forward, always trying to convince funding bodies, reviewers that this is something new. Here's the rationale. It has legs. It can work. So saying to folks, you don't think you're an entrepreneur, your career has actually been very entrepreneurial by the fact that you're out there, you're problem solving, you're always moving into new territory, else, you wouldn't be a researcher.
Sure. I think one, and then let's do a little bit of the science part, because I know this is always a part of the fun of it. But as a friend of mine once described what we as academics are, is he described a university or a medical school as a mall, and we each own our own shops. And as long as we pay the rent, the head of the mall leaves us alone, and then it's up to us to make that shop succeed. So it is, as you say. But enough of these. Let's talk a little bit about the science, because, and I did catch that you've also pivoted to not lifestyle products, but health style products.
Consumer health.
Consumer health products. But let's dive a little bit into your CF work, because I think it's something that I find particularly fascinating, and hopefully it will drive all the way through. So CF, cystic fibrosis. Okay. You have a lead, Linovex. And what's unusual about it is most of the things I know that are done for CF are target specific. Usually you have to divide the CF community into subgroups. And you obviously know this better than I do. And what you're doing is actually quite different. And I just want you to talk about that a little bit. So it doesn't just hit a target. It loosens mucus. It goes after biofilms, actually boosts the antibiotics, may also calm inflammation. And in that sense, it really can be used by any CF patient. So here's my question. So
And
when you were pursuing this,
Mhm.
was that your actual original goal, or did those magical properties of Linavex actually just sort of emerge over time and you realize, actually, this would be a better approach"?
So this is a classic biotech serendipity story. So our first class of molecules that we were developing were more pure play antimicrobials, and we still have an interest in there, but we've pivoted a little bit in how we're going to deliver them. But novel synthetic antimicrobial peptides, but based on endogenous AMP, so again innate immune effector molecules. And cysteamine Linavex, so cysteamine means the API of Linavex, was something that we were going to include potentially as an adjunct to one of our AMPs that was very effective against Pseudomonas, which is the main gram-negative bacteria associated with the lung infections that people with cystic fibrosis have a lot of issues with. Other organisms as well, but Pseudomonas is still a huge issue. So we thought, okay, our peptides are really good at penetrating biofilms. And this is known. If you get the properties of the peptide right, they can be tens of thousands of fold better than a small molecule antibiotic at penetrating that horrible slimy biofilm
Right.
structure. And so we thought, okay, what molecules can we see that we could potentially introduce as adjuncts to help break that biofilm down even further? And if it is mucolytic at the same time, great. So not really thinking this is a direct therapy, but something with our peptides. And what the data showed completely blew our hypothesis out of the water, in that actually, and I'll come on to why we picked cysteamine, which is another great story. We didn't have to go far down the alphabet. What we saw from the data was actually the peptide plus cysteamine mixture was only really additive. It wasn't synergizing. It wasn't really giving us 1 + 1 = 10, which we were going after. But that data also showed something very unexpected, that on its own, it was a phenomenal antibiofilm agent, both inhibiting and disrupting biofilms of Pseudomonas and a range of Pseudomonas pathogens as well. And beyond that, it was doing something with the control antibiotics that we put in there. And I think we published this back in 2014. So it seemed to be potentiating and synergizing not so much with our peptides, but with tobramycin as one example, which was it still is an important antibiotic in CF, but because of some of its side effects, there are guidelines now that shift away from that in certain circumstances. But it's a great gold standard for those kind of experiments. So that was very surprising. So we've got something here that's actually, potentiating other antibiotics, not necessarily our putative ones. So always pick your controls carefully if it doesn't show you the data that you expected. So then we progressed on the basis of, let's have a look more at what it's doing to CF sputum, because it's clearly breaking down synthetic mucin, look at a wider range of organisms that we know are problematic in CF, such as Burkholderia, Acinetobacter, and also looked at molecules similar to cysteamine, because we had cysteamine and lots of its cousins in the fridge already, because one of our other programs was looking at fungal nail infection. You couldn't have two more distinct indications, even though both infectious. And again, we were trying to approach both with a solution developed from the innate immune system.
Right.
And we had to have cysteamine and a bunch of aminothiol molecules, because they have been used as nail penetration enhancers in the past. So as we had it, we thought, we'll do these as the first experiments, blown away with the results. But of its relatives, the one that we picked is now not just Linavex, but the API for our pneumonia IV candidate therapy as well, performed much better than any of its relatives, and we now know why. So we also know, and we published on this, the glycine decarboxylase target, and fascinating because cysteamine is part of the innate immune system. It's a breakdown product of coenzyme A. It's only released during infection and inflammation. Has also been approved for a rare metabolic disease, cystinosis, since the 90s. So it has the added bonus of lots of clinical safety data. Regulators are very comfortable with it, which is great. Plus, its related compounds, including N-acetylcysteine, have been used for a long, long time in critical care medicine and also in other respiratory diseases. So lots of stars aligned, lots of dots were joined, and we now know that this targets prokaryotic targets and basically shuts down lots of mechanisms. That really means everything, including resistance in bacteria, can be shut down very early on. Delivers the killer punch. It's antimicrobial in its own right, but at high concentrations, where it really shines is as it would be in the immune system, working with, for example, nitric oxide and then delivering that killer punch. But it has viral protective mechanisms. It is potently anti-inflammatory in terms of shutting down IL-6 production, how it regulates interferon production. So it's a phenomenal molecule, and we cannot take any credit for inventing it, just working out its properties that the immune system has been using for a long, long, long time, and then deploying that as a therapeutic in infectious inflammatory respiratory disease, which its properties are absolutely perfect for.
Sure. Well, I think, and then I'm going to hand it to Sandy. I think for me to sort of summarize this, and for our lay listeners, what I understand you're doing, if we also with things like nevarafin and so on, is the basic idea is that you are mirroring the molecules that our own bodies use.
Yeah.
And which I think is kind of genius, and it's not as so obvious, or people more would do it. And because of that, it can act both more broadly, hopefully better, in sort of helping and leveraging how we already go at things. And it's probably, I think, one of the major ways forward for emergent antibiotic resistance, all these superbugs and so on. This would be like a whole another podcast for us to chat about. But I just wanted to say, I see the line through all the different approaches that you all have been doing with this. I think it's genuinely brilliant to do this. I think it has a lot of potential. I can see going sort of horizontally as well as pushing vertically in particular diseases. So I just wanted to say that this is really very sharp. I do want to hand over though, because I know he's been busting to ask questions.
Well, just quickly, if I may, as well, I guess on the almost the anti-precision medicine. I think in CF,
you're talking to the king of anti-precision medicine. You've said just the right words. Ironically, I'm Regis Professor of Precision Medicine, which is pretty funny, actually.
Well, it's, I think modulator therapy and disease-modifying therapies for cystic fibrosis, which just came into being as we were developing Line-of-X, are so important, for that genetic disease, for the people with CF who have mutations against which you can deploy those disease-modifying therapies, but they don't address the symptoms. So you still get the exacerbations regardless of your genetics exacerbations, which are flare-ups of the inflammation of CF, usually driven by, the bacteria. A virus can be, the actual starting trigger and a whole series of events, but ultimately you're unwell, tend to end up in hospital on intravenous antibiotics. That's whether you're on a modulator or not. If you're not, they're more frequent still. But we wanted something that, as you said, was relevant to all patients, regardless of genetics, and could be deployed as long as the patient and the clinical team know that they're experiencing an exacerbation. This is where you deploy that, and that's the oral form of Linovex. And as a strategy of maintaining ventilatory function, just keeping a lid on that inflammation and also to some degree controlling the microbial environment. We do have an inhaled version, but that's earlier stage than what we've taken now all the way through to phase 2b clinical trials.
Got it. So, and I know all of this is going to, and I'm trying to pivot, all this is going to require a lot of high-end infrastructure, which you know better than anybody, which is one of the reasons we asked you to come here. Serious capital, which we've already done a full podcast trying to describe what all this means. And it's, as I said, it's not easy, but it's easier to get the first capital than it is to get the follow-on capital, which I suspect you'll agree with me on that. But this brings us to your other major role in the Scottish ecosystem. First, let's take a break before discussing your leadership role in driving biotech forward in the Northeast life sciences community. We'll drop the second half of the discussion in a few days. Now would be a great time to grab your sausage rolls and prepare for the second half of our fabulous chat with Deborah O'Neill. Catch you soon.
Yeah, see the vision clear. We're here to run the long game. Blueprint set, no fear. Playing out the long game. The long game. Hey, the long